you keep a secret? Neither can we. In this episode, we discuss the jungle of insider and preview programs in the tech world. We have a look at a new type of airplane that could have a big impact over the next decade, before we talk transient atmospheres and dwarf planets. This episode's sponsored by the little gnomes living in Joel's beard.
And this is The Dane and the Pain, the show the sun circles around, and we have the thinnest atmosphere in the Milky Way. Hello, Joel. How are you doing?
The Milky Way?
Yeah, I like
Is
Milky
that the
Way.
galaxy we're in?
Well, I don't know. It's delicious.
Yeah. I never was a Milky Way fan, but then again, I'm not a chocolate fan, so...
Oh, really? Yeah.
What's been going on?
I like chocolate. So what's been going on? Now, obviously you, dear listener, you will have just listened to this the week after the previous episode, but it's actually been a couple of weeks since Joel and I have spoken. So this past week in Australia, well, in Victoria, we kind of went from pleasant autumn-like conditions of 25 degrees and a bit of sun to floods, water, wind, 10 degrees, unpleasant, lots and lots of leaves in the pool for me to fish out. So I've been doing that. Been fun. Woohoo! So that's kind of the state of the weather. We had this hurricane come in Queensland, and I was driving up to Sydney with my good friend Troy that was on the show, and he had just bought a new car in Melbourne, so he came by my place and we then drove to Sydney for an MVP gathering or community event that was up there. And as we were driving towards Sydney, so that Sydney's about 7-8 hours from here, but we took the long way with the more fun roads, so it probably took us about 11. And we get sort of a couple hours up the road, and he gets a call from his wife saying, "Hey, you know what? Our house is flooding." And he was like, "What?" It wasn't quite flooding, but there was water coming in places where water should not be coming in, so there.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, there was, and this was only the little bit of weather that was at the bottom of this cyclone or cyclone weather system. So that was an interesting week of just weather. Australia gets some crazy weather sometimes, and this week or the last week was especially some of it. What about you, Joel?
So you were driving in a fast car. You were driving in a fast car, evidently, this past week, and I had the good fortune. So I have family from Montana, and was down in Montana. And there's two things about that. First of all, you can drive very fast in Montana, and I happened to get a really nice car that they gave us, didn't ask for, and forgive me if I don't remember the exact model because I wasn't really paying attention, but it was a Volvo XC90 or something.
Yeah, big SUV thing.
And it was really, it was really fast and fun to drive. But it was weird because anytime you got off the highway, it kept flashing these signals or this warning telling you to pay attention because you're entering an unverified road. And it just drove me nuts because, this is an example of what, I suppose if I was a person who had never driven in the Madison Valley before, that might be useful. But if it's a dirt one-way track and you're coming off of a two-lane pavement, that's probably a given. And of what use would it be? Except to maybe make you turn around. It's not going to help you find your way.
Yeah, but
Anyways,
remember,
I just thought that was silly.
You should not confuse incompetence with stupidity, right? There are some people that would just not get it. So this is typical.
It could be. I mean, it could just be Swedish sensibility. It could also be that something particular to rental cars, so you don't take them four-wheeling, which I did not. We were on some very nice country roads in search of critters to look at. But anyways, got to drive really fast, which is always fun.
That is a nice car, though.
Actually, yeah, Montana used to not have daytime speed limits.
Daytime.
So as long as you, so as long as you were driving in a safe fashion, you could drive as fast as you wanted.
Yeah, we had this in Northern Territory, so that's where, well, there's not much there, really. Darwin is at the top of Australia, at the top of the Northern Territory, and then it kind of goes down to the middle, and there's this big rock called Ayers Rock or Uluru. And that Northern Territory is a territory. It's not a state. I'm not sure what the difference is, but they also used to have no speed limit because you had to go 400 kilometers to get anywhere. So what was the point of having a speed limit? You just, there was nothing there anyway.
Yeah,
and then they put in 130 speed limit, and then no one cared, and I believe they've removed it again. So there's Aussie for you.
Anyway, well,
yes.
I think that's one thing that we share in common is love of cars that go quickly.
Well, and safely. I'm certainly not a proponent of driving like an idiot, but I do believe that you can certainly drive fast and safe at the same time. But unfortunately, most people don't kind of either have that view or don't do it. Yeah.
Well, what do we think? What do you think we should talk about today? It's been a while. There's lots of stuff going on.
There is lots of stuff going on, and it was kind of like pick out the interesting bits. But I was reminded of a conversation we had some weeks ago where we weren't recording. We were talking about products and how they're marketed worldwide, and you came up and had this thing of, well, you're a Bing insider, I believe, and you had these thoughts about region locking or not selling products in regions, and there was some interesting points in that discussion, so I was going to try and rehash that conversation probably.
Well, yeah, so I have, there's lots of these different insider programs which I think are great and serve a purpose. I do think, though, that they are somewhat self-selecting. And when I call in via Skype for these get-togethers, generally I'm just listening, and sometimes I'll have online polls or things like that to respond to. But it struck me as, a couple things that it's self-selecting. So you really have people who already have an active interest in the product, and that they seem to be, again, on the face of things, a lot of people very similar to me. And if you're trying to build a better product that faces the other 93% of the world that doesn't live in the U.S., that you would want to have feedback from those folks as well. And so I've not really ever asked anybody, but I mean, not formally, but it doesn't seem that there are similar, or maybe there is similar insider programs or efforts in other other countries. Is there a version of Donna Sarkar, and I apologize if I pronounced her last name wrong, in, say, India or Pakistan or Romania or wherever. So it's sort of I kind of have two thoughts about it. I like being involved, but I also wonder how useful it is to have sort of the same vanilla opinion.
Yeah, I've been on a number of these, especially in the Nokia days. I was on a ton of Nokia developer programs, and they were Australian specific. Well, initially it was. I mean, I always fondly remember the Develop DVLUP program, which was for developers on the Windows Phone platform.
Yeah,
it was probably one of the best developer programs I've ever come across. And unfortunately, when Microsoft took over Nokia, they kind of destroyed it. But it was really well done, and it was done by Nokia in the US initially, I believe. And it spread out to all the different countries, and Nokia Australia certainly went on board as well. And there was a specifically designed segment of it that was only for Australia. So we had Australian rewards, so they were skewed more towards Australian products, Australian industries, and it was refreshing. I don't see many of those programs today because America is such a big market. So you obviously get a lot of the emphasis on America, A lot of emphasis is on India, is on China, because there are such an enormous amount of people. And in Europe, I believe, especially, I mean, I can only speak from the Microsoft side of things, there are certain user programs or insider programs, or whatever they're called, that come out of Germany, out of France, out of Italy and UK, because those markets are big enough. There's enough people in those. Whereas I believe Scandinavia is just one market.
You all get lumped in together.
Yeah, we do. We do get lumped in together. And to be honest, I mean, I'll get in trouble for saying this, but there's not that much difference between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, right? I mean, it's not
You're gonna
like
burn in hell for that one.
exactly. It's not like India and Mozambique, right? Like there is a certain similar culture in those Nordic countries. So I could imagine Spain and Portugal might be one market. I'm not sure, but there certainly are, and you'd have to concern your effort with the markets that will give you return. That's just how it is. And once you get some traction, you probably expand out. So I would imagine that whatever program is in the US would also exist in China and India in some form if the company has any presence there. And then, of course, there are the global programs as well.
Well, but this also goes and it kind of ties in with this whole notion of region locked or specific services. And just to back up for a minute, I have to say that the reason that I sort of got involved in some of these insider programs was because someone from a developed program in the West Coast in Vancouver reached out to me, asked me for feedback, and so it's interesting that you bring that up, because you and I would not be talking right now if that email had not been sent.
That's right.
Right. So whenever I tell people nothing is neutral, that's a point. Somebody from that program responded to me at my email with a question, not knowing me, not knowing what that would mean, and that was very meaningful to me and set me down a path. But I digress. We're back to region locking, and say with the Bing Insider program. Well, one of the concerns I hear constantly is, why are services, say Cortana, region locked? And I'm sure there are good reasons.
I can answer that one.
But I would suggest that with a service, say like Bing, if you're making it so complex that you cannot support it across multiple markets, then perhaps it's not the service that you need. And it's also possible that I'm only hearing, the sort of the very particular pointy end user that is really concerned about this stuff, and most people aren't. But I think, I've heard enough feedback to think that region locking is a dissatisfier for a lot of people, especially in this. If the internet and these social platforms were not so prevalent and people couldn't see, right? 20 years ago, you would not know if, my car in the United States had a different, sweet, version of a turbocharger that you couldn't get unless you were actively looking for a magazine or reading through a magazine. And now it's right there.
Yeah.
Anyways.
No, some of them I understand, like say Cortana, which I've been doing quite a lot with. Cortana is incredibly localized, so that it's very, very specific to the region that she is made for. So you have it obviously came out for the US first, so it was very US centric, but then you wanted her to speak Spanish or German or French or whatever it was, that those languages that came later. Even to the point that in China, it's not even called Cortana. I can't remember what the name is, but it has a completely different name and different emoji or different logo, because it had to make sense in that localized environment. And you can't just take the American Cortana and put it into Bangladesh. It just wouldn't work. So that side of things I understand. It's a product that is specific for a single market. But something like iTunes, like why can't I buy this movie that's available in the US and has been for 2 months. Why can't I buy it on the Australian iTunes? I understand that there are legal things that had to be set up and whatever, all the paperwork around it. But for the end consumer, it doesn't make any sense. There's no reason why it shouldn't be available. And then to your point of what was the last thing that you mentioned? I forgot now.
I don't know.
I don't know. This is how the show goes, people. We kind of forget halfway through what the hell we're talking about.
No, I mean, but it's. I think it's the notion that you can't release a product in one market and then expect everybody else that's not getting it in another market to be all happy about it, because the world is way too connected now and people find out. And just because they live in a market that it maybe isn't in your mind your primary market doesn't mean they don't want it. Right?
That's right. Yep.
And it may not make financial sense for you to support that, but what then you have to be prepared for is the negative feedback, which I'm sure they probably get a fair amount of. I don't know that firsthand, but I have to assume.
So I was buying the Cosmo robot that I've talked about a few times, and I went to the Anki website. So Anki is the company that makes it, and I was going to buy it directly from them because then no middleman. It supports the company better. Blah blah blah. I thought I was doing the right thing. I put in my credit card, and it goes, "No, that credit card's from a country we don't support." And I'm like, "What? So you can't take my what?" So I couldn't buy it there. I had to go to Amazon, US, buy it from there, and then have it shipped via Amazon to Australia. And that to me is completely ridiculous because they just paid Amazon a bunch of money that they didn't have to. So I'm not sure what the
Amazon got their pound of flesh, or I think what are their profit margins are about 3%. So they got their 3% out of you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of 3% that gets going through Amazon.
Yeah, it adds up.
It does.
And but back to the insider thing, I just think that what I think in generally this would be the risk, I think, of the insider programs is that or the MVP is that you have people that have a vested interest in the platform of the service, and they invest time and energy into that, but they are not necessarily your consumer. And so if you rely on those folks to give you feedback, what you get is a narrower and narrower and narrower view of your product. And I don't think that's healthy. And I can't say that that's exactly what's been happening, because I know, they say there's 10 million insiders or something involved in the insider program within the Microsoft services. But I think, to me, that's a concern I would have. That would be the biggest concern, actually.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. I could talk a lot about the MVP program, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother can of worms. My point being is that if it's the same, if it's Microsoft shouldn't be looking to me being the royal me, to get in feedback on how to support a mobile based OneNote that's going to be used in India. Right?
No.
I know what I like here, but what the hell does it have to do with another country or what they may be thinking about in another market? And I suppose there's they have smart people and they found a way around that, but I've never heard them talk about those programs in other countries or how they do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's an interesting topic though, and it's if we have any listeners from any of the countries that we haven't mentioned, where of localized or country-specific programs, please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear about it. You can look us up on Twitter, Dane_Payne, right? And then we're on Facebook, right? And we have our own website, thanks to Lars.
Yep.
And I would encourage you to hassle Lars
Or you just call Joel's
Twitter and
private
follow Lars
1-800
Quinn.
number. That works as well.
Yes. It's 1-800 I'm sick of the rain.
1-800 Alaskan
Right
dude.
now.
Um,
Dude, that's right.
okay, let's move on because you sent me an article that I thought was really quite interesting, and again we talked about Zoom. Is that what they're called? No, what were they called?
You mean boom?
Boom. Sorry, I got that one wrong. The Boom supersonic airplanes a while back, and in this case they were talking about making air travel lots faster at the same price as today. In this case, now you sent me an article about a company called Zunum, Zunum, or if you're an American, it's called Zunum, Zunum Aero. Get that one in there. And they're proposing electric airplanes. And it looks quite interesting. Like the mock-up that they've shown of these planes look kind of like a Learjet-sized thing. And they look kind of like normal airplanes, but they're electric. And they say that the biggest advantage of this is that you have a lot less time either end, in terms of queuing up, in terms of getting on, or because there's no refueling, and they're much safer, and you can just get people off, put them on really quickly, and it would save you hours, and it would also allow you to reduce fares by 40 to 80%, which to me is not going to happen because they still want to make money. But it could be be cheaper. Yeah. Anyway, I thought it looks really interesting, and I'm glad that someone's doing something about it.
It's they are interesting, and I think that they're talking about with a pretty small capacity, and they're regional. So in the States, that would be in the Pacific Northwest if you wanted to fly from Seattle to Portland, that kind of a flight. But what I think is this is another service that is blooming under the umbrella of, and God, I hate for even saying this, Tesla. And because as you have more people working on these products and improving the efficiency and all that, you have more people who have experience doing it, and sort of success begets success. And so I think this is kind of cool. And the other thing is electric power in the States is relatively cheap. But there's certainly as coal and things become less prevalent, and maybe that's not the case. But I think this is really interesting, and having a brother that flies for Alaska, and having been on Horizon flights and having to smell diesel fuel, I think getting on and off an electric plane would be kind of cool. One other quick point about this is the next one that I think will come is, there's a huge RV market in the United States. I don't know about the rest of the world. I know when I was in Europe, there were smaller versions of what we would call RVs here, is that you'll start seeing electric vehicles like that. And, there's these whole series of RV parks all across the U.S. and national parks. And, all of these would need charging stations and all that kind of stuff. So there's this, this sort of, fermenting, bubbling market that exists there. And this is just another example of one of those markets that could exist, based on what you see happening with Tesla.
Yeah, it's especially around RVs. I think it's interesting because that's a market that is so different in the US than the rest of the world. Because what you call an RV, most people call a bus, right? It's the size of them is enormous. So that kind of, I can see why you would want to make those electric, because people don't go very far in RVs every day. There's a lot of bulk to carry, which is good for electric motors because the torque is there. You don't have to go very fast. It just kind of makes sense. I just want to go back to the plane for a bit, for a minute, because there was one interesting fact here. They say with Zunum Aero is that these guys aren't looking to build planes that revolutionize the aviation right now. So they want to build small planes, 10 passenger capacity, and then in the next 15 years or so, as battery technology change, they're actually going to improve the design and then make them go further and further with more and more people. They're hoping to build aircraft that can carry 50 passengers and travel about 1,000 miles on a single charge, which is, it says Seattle to LA or Boston to Jacksonville, Florida, which is decent. That's useful, and especially in a continent like Europe where everything is so close, it would make perfect sense, and it would be it would probably have a really good foothold in the short distance aviation market, because you're not going to replace the A380 anytime soon, because it's the bulk of people that it can carry long distances. Just makes sense. Anyway, that was my 2 cents on the on planes.
And it also does. You're not going to disrupt that market, right? So the amount of change that you're going to need to make to disrupt that market, in regulatory and otherwise. So we were talking about that an episode or so two ago, where when you have these large entrenched industries, it's hard to get them to move off of that. But anyways, I there's also, some of the big companies like Boeing, and actually this company is based out of Washington, and I think there are a couple of others that are working on their versions of this. So I'm not sure where this one will go. I probably need to read a little bit more up on it, but
yeah, well,
pretty interesting design, the mock-up.
For sure, but as always, one of the problems they will have is infrastructure, right? It's what Tesla has been building themselves, has been supercharger stations, so that there was a way to actually travel. And these guys will have the same problem. It'll be an issue of, well, do we have airports that can allow us to recharge? Will we fit in with regulatory, guidelines in these areas? There's all these not consistent, but these current conditions that they will have to abide by, or they will have to change the system all by themselves, which is unlikely. So it's not as easy as just building a plane. You've got to have all the other part of it as well.
Indeed. Well, like building a plane is easy because, right? So how many countries have commercial airlines being built?
Well, the U.S.
I think at one time there was just a handful. There was less than 10 at one time. I don't know what the figure is.
I know of
right now.
Of the U.S. has Boeing. Brazil has the
what's it called?
Embraer.
Oh, I can't say it.
Those ones.
Yeah, that one.
Which is a good plane, actually. I flew on those in Europe. And then obviously there's Boeing. There's Airbus, which is, well, it's kind of French, but it's a conglomerate. There's especially with the A380.
It's kind of French.
Well, it was French initially, but now if you look at the A380, it's built in Holland, Ireland, UK, Germany, France, maybe a few other places as well. It's just they all went together because there was so much money needed to invest in the project. Airbus wasn't going to do it all on their own, so let's call it French with a bit of injected cash. You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know.
Have you got an RV?
I do not, but I grew up. We took a couple trips across country when I was very young in an RV. This would have been in the 70s.
Oh, wow. So huge, slow, polluting
traveled,
things.
V8 gas engine.
Yep.
I think at the time, if I recall, if he cruised at the right speed, he could get 8 to 10 miles a gallon on it.
Yeah,
I think.
Yep.
But in the States, then fuel was, I don't know, $1 a gallon or something like that. I can't remember, something stupid, maybe less.
Yeah, exactly.
When you would get in the South.
Yeah, it's not the most efficient thing that you could ever have. And let me just see here. I was just looking up. So that's about 3 kilometers per liter. For those that are in the metric system.
If you want to. And they're much more efficient now, but they're still.
Sure.
I have a family member that has one, and they're still really horrible.
But electric would make perfect sense in that scenario. I can certainly see that.
I think so, but I have to tell you, I went and looked because I was kind of curious if there were any companies selling electric RVs or working on it, and I really couldn't find anything, and I didn't really look hard, but
Okay.
yeah, I'm gonna dink around a little bit more and see if anybody else is doing it. Maybe somebody out there listening knows. If so, of course, shoot us an email or tell us what we don't know.
Not all of it, please. Don't tell us all of what we don't know. No. So I'm gonna move to space. Do you want to talk about space?
The space between my ears.
No, that would be a quick conversation. I want to talk about the. You sent me an article about this planet called Ceres. Ceres. I think that's how you pronounce it. Ceres. Incidentally, Ceres is also a Danish brewery that my dad used to work for. So we talk about the planet, not the beer. So it's a. It's
that explains a lot. Your dad worked at a brewery.
He did. He sold wine for like 20 years, and then he sold beer and soft drink for about 15 or something, or 20 years maybe. So yeah.
Wow.
And then he was a travel guide. So Ceres, however it's pronounced.
Ceres.
It's apparently a dwarf planet. And I don't know what a dwarf planet is, but I'm guessing it's smaller than a regular planet, which is why it's called a dwarf planet.
Is it politically correct to call a planet a dwarf? I mean, I
don't know.
I don't keep up with this stuff.
If I don't know this planet personally, but let's not offend any planets. I'm just reading from the literature that I have on the screen. I like all planets, even dwarf planets. And that's called waffling.
So what about this?
It's
so what was it about this planet that I thought was interesting?
So apparently it has what's called. So it's between Mars and Jupiter, and it has a transient atmosphere. And I'll just read from the article here. It says. Scientists have never been completely sure if Ceres has an atmosphere or not, but now data from the Dawn spacecraft in orbit of Ceres confirms the dwarf planet really does have a very weak atmosphere, but it comes and goes. The on-again, off-again nature of Ceres' atmosphere appears to be linked to solar activity. When energetic particles from the sun hit exposed ice within the craters on Ceres, the ice can sublimate. I didn't even know what that means, and create an exosphere. Sublimate.
That just means it just gets absorbed into.
Oh, okay. I learned something today. And it can create an exosphere that lasts for a week or so. So it's an interesting study in how, potentially atmospheres could come into existence. Obviously, there's not enough magnetic fields or gravity or whatever it is that holds the atmosphere to the body. In this case, so this kind of comes and goes as the ice melts. But it's very interesting, and I thought it was very interesting because they've managed to photograph this, and they managed to photograph the hydrogen content in colors. So there's this nice spinning, and of course I'll put the link in the show notes as always. There's a nice spinning image of Ceres where it's blue at the poles and it's red in the middle because there's less hydrogen content because the water doesn't evaporate because it's on the poles. And this, to my knowledge, I haven't seen before. So I don't know. I found that really quite an interesting observation.
And you're probably asking yourself, why did Joel think this was interesting? And it was like you, it was the first time I'd seen it. But one of the reasons I thought it was interesting is it got me thinking about perception and expectation. So we have an atmosphere on our planet, and nobody expected to find this atmosphere, this type of atmosphere. I don't believe. Had never heard anybody postulate that this might be available or might be out there. Mm-hmm. And I think that you can apply that more broadly to anything, any problem you're working on. And really what got me thinking about it today is my frustration with people's fixation on the rectangle as mobile. And if you get locked into that notion that phone is mobile, you lose the ability to even imagine something different. So I'm not trying to change the subject to mobile necessarily, but more to get people, to encourage people when you're approaching a problem, to try to get your mind clear of your preconceived notions. And also just because it's fascinating, because just because we think, we go looking for what we think life is, to be honest, it could be looking us straight in the eye, in our eye. We don't know with what. We just don't recognize it. And that's true with so much of science. It's pretty much all of science. We just don't know.
That's true, because we can only define life from what we know. And to us, if you can detect water, then you have a possibility of life, and that's how we see it. But why couldn't organisms live off a transient atmosphere? We don't know. I'm not a scientist, and I'm just kind of talking out my backside here. But that, if you keep your mind open, why is that not a possibility? And granted, this article does mention the words gamma ray and neutron detector, so that's cool just for that. But it does have it describes the evidence they found. They found ice in 3 out of 4 occasions on Ceres, which was odd, but it kind of was there and then wasn't in one occasion. But they've also been able to kind of analyze the structure of the subsurface of this planet, and this is where they found more ice, and then in this they kind of concluded that shapes of craters and other features are consistent with significant water ice content in the crust, is what they're saying. So yes, there's water, but it's not water as we know it. And in fact, I was listening to another podcast talking about moon bases on .NET Rocks, and they were talking we could actually have ice in the craters on the moon. It's not H2O ice as we know it, but it's ice nonetheless, made up of other chemicals. I might say other molecules. So yeah, I don't know where this is going to take us, but I thought it was a really interesting discovery, because it's kind of pushing us to what we think a planet is, or think what an atmosphere is, and think what should be there and shouldn't be there.
Well, I also would encourage folks, and I will repeat this, but read everything. Don't read everything. And, I don't typically go around reading stuff about extra Earth exploration. But something about this caught my eye, and read it, and, and then I learned something, and I thought it was really cool. And so I thought we should probably share it. And, I would encourage everybody to do that. And if you find really cool stuff, you send it, tweet it at Lars or I, or send it to us, and or ask if you want to come on the show and talk about it. Come and talk about it, because I love to learn new stuff.
Absolutely, I'd love to have a astronomer or a physicist or something on the show that knows what the hell they're talking about.
I actually have. So I was in Montana. I saw my nephew, who is a geophysicist, and he may or I don't want to speak about it too much, but he's trying to find or starting to look for work in the rare earth metals exploration, and I think it'd be fun to have him on it sometimes. Besides the fact that he's a bit crazy, but he's also
runs in the family.
Obviously, he's much smarter than I am. He's very sharp. So, anyways, that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you got a joke for us, Lars?
Well, I was about to say if you know what time it is, but again, you beat me to it. So yes,
Yeah,
it is.
Sorry about that. I think
time.
It's because they're so good. That's why.
Now shut up. It is time for Joke of the Week.
It's the joke of the week, so come along with me. I cannot promise it will be funny, but it's the joke of the week.
So, how many balls of string would it take to reach the moon?
How many balls of string, or did you say bowls?
No, balls. How many balls of string
Bowls
would it
or
take?
balls?
Balls.
Like a bowl, like a BOWL.
No. Jesus, American. BALL. How many balls of string would it take to
Okay.
reach the moon?
500,000.
No, one. Just a very large one.
Again, to my point earlier, right? No imagination, Joel.
Exactly. Oh, dear. So that was my astronomy joke
Well,
of the day. Now,
Well,
what's coming up next time? Do we know?
I don't know. We might have a guest. We may not. I think whatever we have, it'll be fun. And make sure you go and check out our website. We do have a spot if you choose to support us with either cookies or a cash donation, preferably unmarked bills.
Yeah, please send
We
cookies.
don't want euros. We'll take Swiss francs.
Swedish krona.
And if you have cryptocurrency, really,
Why not?
and cryptocurrency.
Oh, cryptocurrency. Yeah, I like Dogecoin.
Absolutely. Okay, cool.
All right.
Until next time, Lars.
See you, mate.
Take care.
Thank you for listening in on another episode of The Dane and the Pain. We record across the Pacific, across hemispheres, and across time zones. You can find us on www.daneandthepain.com. Our Twitter handle is Dane_Pain, and we are The Dane and the Pain on YouTube and Facebook. We're also on your favorite podcast app, including iTunes, and please join our fan club by clicking the Register Now button on our website to know about upcoming shows and any free stuff we may have to share. See you next time on The Dane and the Pain.